Capital needs assessment eTool. This is not a recap specific tool. This is a housing tool, right? A multifamily housing tool. It was built, get this wrong, 7 years ago, 8 years ago. Is that right? Yep. Consistent capital needs assessments. Very hard for HUD to enforce across programs, across the industry. Also, important to have data about a property in a digital format so it can be shared and analyzed. That was pretty much why this tool was developed. Recap, having based its whole existence on capital needs of properties, hugely embraced this tool. We love this tool. This is the foundation of everything that Recap does. Okay. The tool has been enhanced over the last few years, particularly this last 8 months for the GRP program. So thanks to the grant loan specialists in the room for being part of the new wave. So the good news for all of you all is you're never going to know what it was like before. The bad news for the rest of you is you had to endure what it was before. And there'll be more improvements. So, and it's important for you all as power users, because the Recap office is a power user group inside of HUD for sure. The CNA development team takes what you all say very seriously. I do a lot of work with that side, and you all are, power users. You use it a ton. It sets a foundation, right? So this tool and the trainings that we're going to do on this tool are not unique to RAD. So you can turn off your RAD filter and just sit back and enjoy CNA eTool. So the idea behind it is, again, streamline review, consistency, and following the guidance that all of HUD wants followed. Beautiful opportunity for Recap and the multifamily housing side that owns this tool embraces all of the green stuff. So everything that's now in the CNA eTool related to green and resiliency is all thanks to Recap. So one of the things that I always enjoy working with your all office is you're always on the forefront in the affordable housing industry. And for example, all of the FHA insured transactions that have to use the CNA eTool, sort of done green in the past, kind of, sort of. There are different ways around it. Now it's going to be right in their face. Now would be an opportunity for them for housing to rewrite some of the map guide and put some of the GRP and RAD and other things that Recap's been doing into general population. Okay, so a lot of the stuff that you're doing now is going to trickle down into FHA. For example, if I come in and do GRP and use FHA insurance, they've got to follow all the GRP requirements. Okay, similar with RAD. Okay. However, the reviewers are different. So if I come in any program that Recap operates and I use FHA insurance, the Recap team defers to multifamily housing and the FHA underwriter with their review and approval of the CNA tool. That isn't to say, and I stress this particularly with Roger in the room because he's endured this, that isn't to say you all don't have influence. That isn't to say that the Recap team isn't looking at the CNAs and doing a concurrent review, if you will. It just means that the person who's signing off on the CNA is multifamily. For example, RAD transactions, so forget about GRP for a minute, but RAD transactions have been around longer, have had green requirements, right? A couple of transactions Roger worked on, there was an FHA underwriter who was not particularly interested in the green requirements, didn't really think that they were important. Roger, being the great guy that he is, just continued. All the green requirements were followed in the FHA development. So for grant loan specialists, that will happen with you all as well. All of the resiliency things that aren't actually part of the map guide yet, but are part of GRP must be done in GRP transactions with FHA insurance. So while you won't be signing off on it as the reviewer, you will be able to enforce that. Okay, so any FHA insured transaction, the responsible party is the FHA underwriter, but the rules are still applied. Okay. If I'm not doing FHA, then I am the responsible reviewer. Okay. So this full CNA tool out here, right? That's all you. You're doing the full review. Okay. There's some quirky things not going to be applicable for GRP, but in RAD, tax credit transactions, new construction transactions are not required to use the complete CNA tool. And by complete, I mean really an inspection, an analysis of the property, photos, that sort of thing. Okay. But they still have to complete the tool because the tool sets up the 20-year schedule and all the pieces that you need to do to finish your analysis. Okay. All right. So transactions that are sort of exempt still have to use the platform, still have to use the tool, just don't have to have some of the requirements. That's not going to happen in GRP because the GRP wrote in the notice that the eTool is required in all transactions. Okay. So if I'm reviewing it, right, it's an FHA deal, I'm just doing a cursory review. If I'm a TM, right, making sure that the numbers match up. Same with grant loan specialists. You're going to make sure that the sources and uses are matching. The deposits to reserve accounts are matching up. That's what you're doing. Okay. For an exempt transaction. So if I don't have to have the whole tool, right, I'm making sure that the flags are covered. The green components are in there. That all of my kind of internal analysis is there. What I'm not going to see, I'm not going to see any pictures. Right. Because more than likely it's new construction. So there are no pictures. Right. Or it's substantial rehab. So the pictures will be irrelevant because I'm ripping everything out. Okay. I'm also not going to need narrative because the determination was made that there's enough rehab being done that I don't need to have a write-up about how the property currently exists. The owner's already said by doing all this work that the property's in not great shape and we're going to make it great. What you are going to see are all the components listed and the age and what's being replaced. So that to the extent that you're looking at it, you're wondering, wow, you're doing a $30 million transaction, but you're not replacing any of the floors. Why is it? Maybe there's a good reason. Maybe there's not. But that's the sort of stuff that you're going to be looking at in your review. Okay. Non-FHA, this is the full review. You're looking at everything. Okay. And we're going to go through some of these. All right. So FHA, stay in your lane. Make sure that your rules are being fulfilled, right? The recap rules are being fulfilled, that you're not the signer. Exempt transactions don't need a narrative, but all the rest of the rules have to be fulfilled. Regular deal, pretty much cookie cutter. What you guys are most of you are going to see regularly are going to see full CNAs. Okay. All right. So let's get to it. What does it look like? Some of you are waiting on bated breath here, so let's get there. All right, so all of us have secure systems access. The CNA eTool lives in secure systems. When you log in, you should get a choice. Much like I showed the RAD resource desk where people have different accesses to different things. All of you have different accesses to secure systems than I do, some more, some less. But all of you should have CNA eTool access. If you don't and you want it, let us know. Okay, and we'll get it for you. So those of you who have it, you're going to click on it. Like the RAD resource desk, as a HUD user, you're able to search the library of CNA eTools. You can also search the ones that you're assigned to. So if you can see that the reviewer name is over here, you can filter on that and assign and figure out which one you want to look at and go quickly to. In this case, I don't want to look at any that I'm assigned to because I don't like any of them. And I'm going to go straight to this Shelbyville, Tennessee transaction that I looked at the other day because I think you all will enjoy looking at it. Okay, so this is the transaction we're going to look at. Just to set the kind of baseline nomenclature, we have recently enforced red pick numbers be entered. Oddly enough, the contractor didn't understand when I asked to enforce this, so they allowed them to add all of the pick numbers, which is totally useless. So that will be fixed soon. But as I said, you can see who's assigned. In this case, Troy's assigned, one of your colleagues, when it came in, and this status under review. This is important because you'll notice some of these are returned, some of these are approved. You should only ever have one under review version of the eTool you're looking at. I'm going to say that again because it's really important. You should be sending back anything you don't like and reviewing a current version or have it pending review. There are many transaction managers, and we'll be talking about this on Wednesday, who are quote unquote sending back a CNA via email. That's not sending the CNA back. This is a tool. Talked about tools back and forth with outside parties. So what happens when you do that is the PHA or the owner contacts the needs assessor. They create a new version. They then resubmit it. Now I have two versions and I don't know what's what. Okay. And now they're both under review. And so if John or I go in to review somebody's work, well, I don't know which one you're looking at. They all have different dates. They have different assessment. If you can figure it out, but it makes it very confusing. And internally, the multifamily team that runs this, they like one transaction. They don't like having multiples out there because they designed the system to have cradle to grave versions submitted, reviewed, approved. Otherwise, they're not in there. Okay, so there are lots of versions out there that are multiples under review. So that's something to think about. All right. So then this is the assessment we're going to look at. This is the assessment ID. You can all click on this and do this yourselves. But this is the kind of how this kind of sets up. So the CNA was designed to go from general to specific and to provide summary information when you first log in. So the first screen you come into, the CNA review screen, this is the summary information. So if I look over here to the left, never, ever, ever, if you ever get one assigned to you that has a severe flag, immediately send me a note. They should not be able to submit to you with severe flag. I have begged to take this off of this screen because it confuses everybody, including FHA underwriters. Why is it even here? Okay. Warnings. You're going to get these. Not a big deal. Warnings have to be explained. The warnings can be generated for a lot of reasons, and we're going to talk about those. This is one of the pieces that RECAP has been very diligent with, and that luckily multifamily housing has been very receptive to creating more warning flags specific to RECAP programs. So there are specific warning flags for GRRP. There are specific warning flags for RAD. Okay. Super cool. Makes the tool even more powerful. And we're going to look at that in just a minute. Informational. There are a few things that are informational. This was kind of a catch-all in the design process just to allow for owners to come back and provide some information in kind of unique situations. I've not seen very many of these. These informational flags don't come up very much. You will want to read them if they come up, but they don't require a response. So you'll notice as I'm looking at these flags, all the warning flags and are color-coded nicely for you. You'll notice that there's this little reviewer response and there's a lender owner response. So the lender owner response is who submitted it, and you are the reviewer. So if you want to respond back and say inadequate when you send this back to them, that's when you're going to do this. Okay. But the owners, lenders, whoever's submitting this needs to respond to your satisfaction. Okay. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. Then we have the repair needs. This can be a little bit confusing because people use different terms and that sort of thing, but generally speaking, the critical repairs are things that are supposed to be done now, as in tomorrow, with the caveat being that accessibility has different rules. So life safety, always. So if there's a life safety critical repair, that needs to be done. If it hasn't been done, it definitely has to be done before closing. And that stands for, again, all RECAP programs. Then this non-critical repairs. Read rehab. Read new construction. Read scope of work. Okay, so recap looks at scopes of work. Scope of work gets produced in the CNA tool. Those items. So in this case, this scope of work has 75 things listed in it. Okay, we'll look at those in a minute, but that's what that is. So don't get confused with the terminology. Non-critical repairs are basically rehab. That's what you are doing. That's the scope of work.
GLS has that.
GLSs are going to have access to this. Yes. Everybody in this room either should have access to this, or if you want it, send us a note and we'll get it for you. Okay. Even the POW team folks, if you all want it, you should have it. If you all don't have it, you need it, and we need to get that going fast. It's certainly faster than Heroes Access. Okay. So you all need to have it. So Cynthia, you don't have it either?
I don't have it.
Okay.
Coming from being an account executive, we didn't have it. We were looking at,
That's changing.
10-year,
Yeah.
CNAs and making, assessments.
Yeah.
But we didn't have this tool. We didn't even have access, and the vendor was supposed to
Right.
enforce this. And I feel like the lender I'm making a generalization, so just bear with me. Like, they didn't want their clients' replacement for reserves to increase. So I felt like they did a more cursory review of the CNAs, and their recommendation was always no increase for the R for R. And so my point is, this tool, as GLS, I'm only speaking for our side. If, let's say, for example, there's a life safety issue that gets flagged, that's usually handled at the asset management level for enforcement. And then there's some overlap, I feel like, with Inspire inspections, right? So I'm just kind of curious as to how internally, HUD staff, be it us, account executives, et cetera, are going to be on the same page with this.
So that's all great questions. So let me just start ticking through them. First, account executives are going to start getting access to this eventually. That's in the works. That is the HUD plan, is that this can be used. It's not happening today. You're 100% right. Okay. Now, step back. GRP transaction comes in. CNA tool is produced. Review is done. You're a grant loan specialist. You're doing the review. Comes back. There are 5 critical repairs, life safety issues. Okay. You will inform the owner of that because they're getting the report as well. You can inform the account executive of that because they're in the mix, because you've talked to them or whatever. But as far as enforcement goes, that's going to be done prior to the GRRP closing. So you don't have to worry that it's not going to get done. It should have already gotten done, right? And the account executive should have helped that happen. But if they do not, that will be done prior to closing. That will be part of the closing coordination. So as you're closing this, one of the things on your checklist is going to be where all the critical repairs are completed. Show me the receipt. Show me that it was done. That's going to be part of your job as closing it out.
They're going to be.
The evidence, absolutely.
And so
100%.
is that, I know with elements, they're in a different stage of their recapitalization.
Well, elements, you wouldn't have a
Right.
CNA. You
Right, so
wouldn't
that's
even know
where
this. So
it's-
right, leading edge is where it's going to start.
Okay.
Comprehensive is going to be where it's going to continue.
Okay.
Right,
I feel like that makes
Yeah.
a lot of sense. I don't have a
Absolutely.
comprehensive
Right.
award yet.
right.
So I just have leading
Right.
edge, and they're so early on.
Correct.
They haven't even got to their, tax credits,
Exactly.
et cetera.
That's exactly.
Okay, I feel better, because I'm like, wait a minute.
Good conversation. That's why we're, yeah, exactly. That's right.
Okay.
Right. No, good conversation. Absolutely. Joey.
There's like standards for who can actually do the CNA?
Correct. Yes.
They have to be like certified as certified.
Right. So there's a cadre of rules and we have a scope of work. There'll be a new, right now there's a red CNA scope of work for assigning a needs assessor. And we're finishing up the one for GRP, which John and I have worked on and will continue to work on, which will then be translated down to red as well.
Is
Yes.
that monitored only like by OAMPO every once in a while? Or like how do we know that the right person?
So from a recap perspective, so how do we know, we being recap, we when we do the review of CNA, make sure that the CNA provider meets the qualifications.
Okay.
Right? So generally speaking, there are 6 needs assessors that do all of the needs assessments for these transactions. So everyone's familiar. If you see one that you've never seen before as a TM or a grant loan specialist, you're going to dig into that and find out who the heck they are and what's going on. The frontline piece, in order to get into the CNA eTool platform, you have to apply to multifamily housing. And so they try and select only people that actually can do it, right? So the menu due diligence is one of the biggest ones, right? So they had to apply to get in. We all knew who they were. They came in just fine, right? Robert Robinson, CNA backwoods user, when I applied, they kicked me out because I never had done these before, right? So that's the way it's supposed to work, right? Okay. Or John applies and his firm's done 3 and the requirement is that you have to have done 5. They'll work with him. Say, okay, you want to get access, we'll figure this out or whatever, we get you in. Trying to encourage more users.
How does the eTool line up with like other CNA tools that are out there on the market?
It is much more robust in the green side. It is way more robust than the Fannie Mae tool on the estimated useful life tables, for sure. From an industry standard perspective, I would say that it is right there, if not the best, one of the best tools available. And it's continuing to get better and better. So it is for me, it's one of the industry standards for sure. Okay, Michael.
I guess a question I have is why are some of the applicants, the GRP, maybe more reluctant to do submitting CNA through this tool?
I'm unsure why they're reluctant, other than that lots of the needs assessors from days gone by had said it was expensive and were worried about cost. Anecdotally, and I'm gonna let John talk to this too, anecdotally, I don't think they want the answer. And I don't think it's the tool as much as they just don't want it. It's not as easily manipulatable, shall we say, right?
Yeah, you took the words. I think too, the multifamily standard, right? We haven't really had the equal standard unless certain situations have a change. So this is kind of ahead of the change with GRP, right? And Robert said, I think you nailed it. I don't think they want to know what is like behind door number 1, right? They're low, right? Well, consequences, but hopefully with GRP, there's also money, right? So it can help, but there's a,
It's gonna be very interesting to see how this happens in GRP, because leading edge is designed for the most sophisticated owners to come in to do advanced things. And so I'm anticipating that when those eTools come in, they're going to be full and robust and great, and we're going to be really happy. Then what's going to happen with comprehensive is, since the MACs are ordering, so it's HUD, right? They're ordering these, and when the answers come back and the owner's not happy, that's when the friction's going to start between the MAC and the owner, working through what am I doing, and then the whole owner contribution idea. Well, am I having to pay for that? I know I need a new roof. And I know that you're going to pay for the difference between the fortified roof and the regular roof, but they've also identified the fact that the trusses are bad. And I don't really want to pay for that. So is GRP paying for that? Well, the answer is going to be no. And so then we're going to have that back and forth. So that's going to be what's interesting to see what happens, because one of the things that we see in RAD is, since the PHAs are the client for the needs assessments, they tend to be dictating the answer. So for your colleagues that are transaction managers, one of their focuses and their struggles is to make sure that things are being covered the way they need to be covered today, not in some fictitious world that the owner happens to live. Roger.
Did Max have the ability on the authority to put back
Absolutely.
on
100%.
the GLS would have to like get in between?
GLS is not going to, the good news is you have the max on comprehensive. So I mean, really the real review for the GLS is going to be in leading edge. I mean, there's going to be a review because HUD has to do the review and approval of the CNA after the max submits it, but it should be done. And you're going to be in that process anyway, because the scope of work again is getting reduced by this. So if you have problems, you'll come back to it. Elizabeth. Right, so we're gonna get into that in just a minute. Absolutely. So that goes into the reviewing of the CNA. That's 100% right. We'll get there in just a minute. Let me get to that point now, since I'm chewing up my time as usual. That's a great question. So for those of you who didn't hear it, are the owners required to do a item that is picked up in the CNA as broken or needs fixing? You know, unlike non-critical repairs. So we're gonna look at that in a minute, okay? Critical repairs have to be done prior to closing. Everything else, we're gonna see what the timing looks like. So we'll get there. All right,
So,
Yes.
Question, so I think you said that, for all cohorts, this tool has to be administered or used.
leading edge and comprehensive, the eTool has to be used.
Okay, so I know for comprehensive, there is that's what the max are looking at everything. So for, I guess, leading edge, do we, look at, I guess, the critical needs that may need to
We're
be
gonna
done?
get there. That's what I'm going. Absolutely. And just so we're clear, today is the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I'm looking at Carly because she and I have spent a ton of time recently. Amanda and I have spent a ton of time recently looking at CNAs. So this is just, Stanley and I are gonna be living together. I mean, it's just gonna be, this is a critical piece. Roger's great. You guys are gonna get lots of training on this. So this is just kind of laying the foundation for it. So don't worry, we got lots of guides and lots of tools. But you're gonna see, again, as we go through this, you're gonna see this tool does a lot of that for you, which is great. So, okay. All right. So anyway, so then just to finish up this this page here, the future needs, this is what your 20-year schedule is going to look like. Okay. Then a very important thing that this sets up is what does my 20-year schedule look like as far as the reserve for replacement deposit account? Okay. So I have an initial deposit requirement, an annual deposit requirement, and I've got certain needs every year. So how's that match up? Right. So this gives you a nice layout of kind of what happens, right? So initially they put in $900,000 here. Annually, they're putting $260,000 in. They ended up with 1.1 million. They didn't have any needs in the first 3 years. Then they suddenly, they started having needs starting in year 4, right? And they just went across and we just kind of look, here's my balance at the end of every year, $2 million, $2.2 million, $2.3 million, blah, 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 all the way around, positive all the way through. All the way to year 20, and then notice I dropped to $680,000 after having $1.3 million. My high water mark was somewhere 2.1. Okay, so just before we go on to the next page to show you some of the stuff, a couple of things just for you all to initially think about. Pushback that you get. Why is my reserve account so high? Why do I need to have so much money in there? Or why does it fall off so steeply in year 20? Well, because most items in a property have between 15 to 25 year expected useful life, right? Okay, my roof's gonna last 20 years generally, right? My windows are gonna last 30 years generally. If I'm looking at a 50-year-old property, I've got some needs there, doors, HVAC systems, refrigerators, but they tend to be pushed out a little bit further because somebody did something, or they get pushed out because people don't want to do it, right? So unfortunately, on the RAD side, the transaction managers have to fight that fight. You're not going to have to fight it, right? Because you're going to get hopefully, knock on wood, a more comprehensive picture from the max. And again, leading edge, those folks want to do the work, right? On the RAD side, it's not that the PHAs don't want to do the work. It's just that they just can't figure out how to pay for it. And they're struggling with changing the way they've always done their work. Okay. But this is a very valuable tool to see. Okay. I'm not going to jump into any of the rest of this stuff, but quick snapshot of what things look like. I did want to look at the warnings before I move on, because this is important, because this is something where the tool, we're working really hard to make sure that the tool pulls out things that are useful for you all as reviewers. Okay. So for example, I love this. The assessment submitted is more than 6 months old. Okay. So for on production sides, they have a 6-month number, right? Recap doesn't have that. Recap typically is on an annual basis. If the review was done in the last year, it's good. Same for RAD, same for GRRP. Okay. But the tool flags it here. I'm glad it flags it because it makes you all go and take a look and see what's going on, right? So this is not going to come up, likely it's not going to come up in GRRP, I hope, because leading edge, they wouldn't do one until they're ready to do the work, and comprehensive max are ordering them all. So you shouldn't see this. Where it might come up are ones that we're reviewing My team is reviewing in this initial review on comprehensive where somebody might have submitted one to see if it is any good. I'm gonna be interested to see if any of those come in, but I don't think they will. We've set some pretty good criteria for that, but that might be someplace that it happens. It happens on the red for PHA side all the time, all the time. Because they go and get a capital needs assessment. It shows that they need to do this work. They're shell shocked. They sit around wondering what they're gonna do. Then they suddenly go, oh, well, I guess I need to do this. So now I'm gonna go apply for tax credits, or now I'm gonna go get a loan. And then depending on which way they go, they may not, the needs assessment might be too old. They need to do an updated review. Okay, but this pulls it out for you. Not gonna spend any time on the percentage inspected, but the rules are 25% of all unit types and all the vacant units. In this particular case, for whatever reason, this property has multiple buildings. And for whatever reason, the way that they entered in their results, there are a ton of flags about this. I haven't had a chance to look and see why. I'm sure it's not a problem. But they're just a bunch of flags. But then there's some really cool ones at the end, which you guys are gonna see a lot of. Remaining useful life less than 10%. So this is something that we love to see flagged because owners want to have things last as long as they possibly can. This is an opportunity, both in the GRP world and the RAD world, to make some adjustments. And if I've got something that is within 10% of its estimated useful life being over, this is a great time to think about early replacing it, particularly with a green alternative, right? What if I've got a more energy efficient hot water heater that I could put at the site? And I've only got 2 more years of useful life on the one I've got. And if I replaced it, my utility costs are going to be cut in half, right? Why wouldn't I want to do that? So the tool flags that so that you as the reviewer can go look at that particular item to see what's going on with that, okay? Flagging windows, right? There's nothing more frustrating than the windows being towards the end of their useful life. And the report says something along the lines of caulking is necessary on a routine basis because the seals in the windows are bad. But the windows aren't being recommended for replacement. Let's see, my maintenance guy is gonna have to go up and do this and, right, you get the picture, right? So that's a flag that I love to see here, okay? There are also going to be flags in here about green items. If they don't enter in a GRP program, we have a flag now where they're required to enter 2 green alternatives. If they don't do that, there's going to be a flag that comes up here. Carolyn's jumping for joy because she's been through this process with me for many, many years. The beauty of this is that you're hoping that when it flags here, they'll go fix it, rather than type in some note about why they didn't do what you're going to make them go do anyway. Right? So at the end of the day, what this should be doing is a 2-way street. It's helping enforce the policies you already want implemented at the very basic level. That's the goal of this. Okay? Right. So since I want to get to the meat of this, I want to show you the kind of, and if you can't tell, I love this tool. So just so we're all clear. So I mentioned the fact that this goes from general to specific. So when I'm a needs assessor and I start filling this in, I start at the very top. What's this all about? What program am I in? Okay. There will be a GRP program. So for all the grant loan specialists in here, that's what you're going to see. In this particular case, this is a RAD for PHA rehab. So the transaction managers who are doing that have that. There's also one for RAD for multifamily. Okay. There's also one for production. There's also one for mark to market. Okay.
When it's a CNA type, it says asset recapitalization. Is that just rehab?
Yeah, that's recap. Basically, that's a signal that's going to come to recap. You guys are asset recapitalization as a group. So production would be one,
Oh,
right? Okay. So then some basic information about the owner, contact information. Then we've added these questions, right? Because what did we talk about earlier? If it's FHA and GRP, who rules? We need to know that in the system. Okay, I need to know if production is going to be the one assigned to this for final approval, but production needs to know that the GRP rules apply and that you all are going to be looking at it too. So we built this flag in here. Okay, The green MIP is a similar thing that production added a few years ago, kind of mimicking what happened with GRP to incentivize FHA uninsured properties to do more green so they get additional, a lower mortgage insurance premium. Okay, so that's why that happened, but that you'll see that in there. Okay, so good flags for them. Then what's my assessment scope? Okay, we've added some information about, for those of you who are following along, there's the National Risk Index. So there's our GRP. Okay, that can now be put in for every property. Not required. Okay, not required, but we can now get that for every property. So when the time comes to update the map guide, for example, if we all still think this is something we want to do, we'll do that. And then furthermore, if they did it, are there any high or relatively high or high items? Okay, and if they are, what are they? So that we know that in the capital needs assessment. Okay. Then the FEMA firm, that's flowed through to housing production as well. Okay, we want that uploaded here. That was something that came through from GRP, came through RAD, down to production. All right. Again, I've done nothing but lay out the property at this point in time and the people, right? Participants, who's in this. Critical piece here, utility information. Okay, there's going to be a big flag now because none of the tools work if we don't have the utility information. Bunches of needs assessments have come in where the needs assessors have not put in the information about what the utility company is, what the rates are. Well, how can I do an analysis of the utility costs and picking a more efficient component than the other if I don't know how much that money is saved? You know, just because I save 1,000 kilowatt hours a year, while that's a great thing from an economic standpoint, if I'm the owner and all I care about is money, doesn't tell me anything. I don't care about having a more efficient. It doesn't matter. Did it cost me anything? It's $10. I'm not doing that, right? Again, GRP rules required, RAD rules required, but at the end of the day, a lot of this is finance driven. We need those numbers. Okay. Then you walk through and you develop the site. What's the site look like? How many buildings are on the site? Okay. So in this case, we noticed all those flags. Why all those flags were there is because look at all these buildings. Oh my God. Oh my God. For reference, a lot of you folks won't know this, but when this first rolled out, one of the big things that people got mad about was they couldn't figure out how they could put multiple buildings into one eTool. They kept coming back saying, we're going to have to do 20 eTools on this 20 building site. We're like, guys, we designed it to start at the site level down to the buildings, and then you put the units in the buildings. It's really easy. Man. Oh, that makes sense. We finally got there. So now you see unit types, unit mixes. The beauty of this tool is you don't have to have consistent unit types across all the buildings. Some are bigger, some are smaller. We can capture all that information here. Okay. Common space. Some buildings may have common spaces, some don't. Again, we're capturing what's here. Parking. Parking is going to be huge in GRP because the parking lots, these properties are going to offer all sorts of opportunities, whether it's putting solar panels over the parking lots or potentially digging the parking lot up and putting in geothermal. There's so many opportunities here. So we want to get all that information. Okay. Now, the meat of things. What does the site look like? What components do we have at the site? One of the questions that we often get asked when we do these trainings about CNAs, it'll come up again and it's just fine. You can keep asking. There's no formula for this. There's no way to say how many components do I expect to see in a CNA. Okay. There could be 20 or there could be 120. It just depends. Okay. And it may be okay to only have 20. It just depends on what you're looking at. Major systems ought to be in there. Major systems include roofing, windows and envelope, HVAC, right? Okay. I want to see some information about flooring. I want to know about insulation, right? So think about a property. I always think about this when I'm looking at these, visualizing what does a typical multifamily property look like? You know, is it a high rise with one entry door, or is it townhomes with every unit has an exterior entry door, right? Okay. Think about it when you're looking at it and go through in your mind. And then when you're doing your review, you go through and you look and see, are all of those items there? So just a quick review here. I've got pavement. I'm going to go through more closely in a minute, but there's pavement, So they got a whole bunch of concrete stuff, then there's a fence. And I got a retaining wall, so this is all exterior stuff, playground. Staircases, unit entry doors, now I'm getting to stuff that I more commonly recognize. Entry system, exterior door, garage doors, vinyl siding. Windows. Right, so I'm starting to see things. Windows. Roof shingles, gutters. Hot water heaters. AC units. Flooring, cabinetry, refrigerators. Okay, so I mean, you get the picture, right? I'm seeing things listed here that I would expect to see in a building. Okay, great. What is an item that I might not see on here regularly? Toilets. Okay, but bunch of trainings, bunch of transaction managers, bunch of FHA staff go ballistic about toilets. Okay, it's okay if the toilet's not in there. Right, toilets last a long time. Now, toilets are also big water users, right? Old toilets might want to be replaced. So depending on the program you're looking at, you might want to think about low flow toilets, or at least understand what's there today. So as you're thinking through your review, think about the things that we're trying to do, okay? All right, let's jump to one so I can get to Elizabeth's question about, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, to go back to the toilets, I hear what you're saying, but I mean, shouldn't they have theoretically all of the properties
They should.
components?
Absolutely. I mean, Carly's right. I mean, again, you know, you're living in a perfect world. It's going to list all of the components. But remember who the universe you're dealing with here. Engineers. So if I'm an engineer and you tell me I want all of the components, I might get, you know, down to the minutia, which I don't really want. Okay, so there has to be some give and take there, right? You know, you get some of these needs assessments that are, you know, a 15-year-old property and I've got a whole sewer analysis. Really? That was where you spent your time and money? Was telling me about the sewer that's going to last for 50 to 100 years? Likelihood of being a problem. So you kind of have to, you know, but I'm also, and you and I talked about this, when you're reviewing these, you're making a list of deficiencies. And if the list of deficiencies is short, before you go back to the owner, you need to make sure you really, really need the two things that you're asking for. Because remember, this isn't so true for the GRP folks because the maximum you're doing this for you also won't matter as much. But for RAD, the PHA has to go back to the needs assessor who has to be paid to make changes, and it just slows things down. So you got to have some sense of reasonableness, right? I mean, my hot button item is smoke detectors. William's laughing because he's heard this story 1,000 times. Smoke detector, that's a no-brainer for me. Smoke detectors are in every CNA that I review. It's a non-starter if it's not in there, if they're not replaced, or not being added. I dig deeply into that, right? Okay, and you all are all going to have your own things. But in order to be, back to my very first slide, consistent reviews, we all need to be consistently reviewing the big things. And then if you want to be hung up on something individually, then just be hung up on something individually for that, right? I mean, I admit it, I have a problem, and I, you know, but they're going to do it.
You're a good company.
So, all right, let's find one so it can show Elizabeth what happens when we start replacing things. Let's find one that's going to be short, useful life, and we can talk about it. Actually, you know what? There you go. Let's see.
Are you gonna go through adding it or like?
I'm just going to show you. We're going to look at it.
When they add it, is it like a drop down menu that they're selecting, like gutters?
Yeah, I'll show you right here. So when you select one, like, so let's check one right now. Great question, Joey. Let me find one here. All right. So when I select that, you'll notice at the top, we've added this little feature at the top where it tells you quickly what they've selected, thus the thumbs up, and whether or not it's green or not. with our little flat, with our little leaf. Okay? So Energy Star by definition is green. So that's why this is green for sure. There may be multiple green alternatives, but if you picked Energy Star, you're good to go. Okay. So just from a review standpoint, this makes your review super easy. It tells you exactly which one they're picking and if it meets the criteria. But to Joey's question, when you fill it out, so when I hit the add, if I'm a needs assessor, there's a little button that says add component in the top right. When I hit that, I get this screen and it's blank. And I go through and there's a drop down for the category, there's a drop down for the subcategory, and there's a drop down for the component type. The bad news about the way this tool was designed was it was designed by a bunch of engineers who love this sequencing. But for those of us who don't really understand the nomenclature and we just understand the parts, it makes it really hard if Allie or I start going through doing the adding. So sadly, the way I end up doing it is I pick the categories generally very broad, and then I jump all the way over to the component type to find out what I'm going to pull and put in. Okay, that's just a user error problem. Okay, so once I select that, then I name it. Okay, and the names don't really matter that much as long as they're in line with what's happening here. Then I provide, excuse me, when it was installed. Okay, this is the date of the report, right? So this is the effective date. So the date of the report is going to drive all of this. It's going to drive the age of the property, the age of the components, all of that sort of thing. Okay. So, which is why when I said earlier, year old is as long as we want to go, because if I'm looking at something that's a year old and I look at a 20-year schedule, I'm already into year 2. If this is already a year old, I'm already into year 2. Year 1 is gone, right? Okay. That's something for all of you all to think about. Okay. Because regardless of what program you're working in, we're already a year into it. And you've got owners, needs assessors who are backloading things anyway. So now it's just compounding the problem. Okay. All right. So standard remaining useful life, standard use 12 years old. So I got 6 years left. If this needs assessor thought that this component was in better or worse shape, that's when they would use this assessed RUL number. Assessed remaining useful life. How long do you, as a professional, think that this component's going to last? In this case, they think it's going to perform just right along standard. Okay. Now, why would I manipulate this? I would manipulate this if my client tells me I don't want to do any rehab. When I get hired and the guy says, I don't want to do rehab, and he comes back and says, here you go. Guess what? Well, I assessed your roof and I know it's only 3 years away from its useful life, but it looks like it's okay. It'll last another 5 years, right? The best one we've seen, I think Amanda and I were looking at one recently where they doubled the useful life. It was a 10-year item and they said it was going to last. It was already 10 years old. They said it was going to last for another 10 years. What? I gave you 3. 10? Oh, right? So filling this out, then they come down. How much did the original component cost? Trust me when I tell you it's always an estimate. Nobody went back and looked at this, and it does not matter. Okay. At the end of the day, I don't care that much about how much the original component cost. And there's some calculations that are done, that sort of thing, but I'm not going to split hairs over that. Okay. This is where
Unit 1, it says each, is that indicating that it's in each unit?
right. So that means that is indicating that it's, so in this particular case, we've got, what did I pull up here? What are we looking at? Water heaters, right? So that's saying that there are 500 of them. Or if it was a parking lot, it might be square feet, right? It's just kind of the unit of measure, like how many. So there are, in this particular case, there are 500 hot water heaters. It doesn't necessarily mean that they're in each unit. It just means there are 500 of them. And my count is each.
I mean, 32.
Oh, sorry, 32. Yes, sorry, cost of 500. Yes, exactly. Yep. Okay. This is where it's important, and this is where it's frustrating that these guys didn't do this because they didn't give us any utility information, right? So if I receive this as a reviewer, this deal is going back immediately, full stop. I'm going to finish my review generally, but I can't really do it because How do I know if I'm comparing utility usages? How do I know what's more efficient? Yeah, they put Energy Star up there, and I'm gonna go with that. But I need the data. I want this information. I need this. Okay? Recap wants this information. We want to be able to gathering data across platforms. One of the reasons that the multifamily folks love us so much is because the rad CNAs that have been done over the last 10 years, 7 of which were using this tool, were required to put the data in because they didn't require it even in their production cell until recently. So they've got a bunch of data that we can start using. Okay, making decisions. Yeah.
Up above, when you showed us that they had picked a green item, can you show where they had comparisons to that green item?
So I'm gonna get there.
Oh, sorry.
We're almost there.
Okay.
So here's my component, right? This is the component that's there. This is the existing component. All right. Now I'm down to replacements. When am I going to replace this? Okay. When might you replace something? Well, you might replace something when it reaches the end of its useful life. That's one time. You might replace it if it's broken, right? Or what's a third time? I might replace it if it makes economic sense, right? If the payback analysis shows that it's more efficient, it's going to save me money over time. Okay. So they select that. They tell you when they're going to do it. Okay. There's some class of work kind of stuff. It doesn't really make any difference. Again, some of this information is great to have, but it doesn't matter all that much to you. Months to complete, who knows, right? You're going to have a general conversation with your owners on how long the rehab is going to take, but I'm not going to drill down to the specific component level, quite frankly, to find that. But back to one of the questions we had about who's filling this out is engineers. So sometimes, you know, you get an engineer who fills all this stuff out. It's amazing. There's a small firm in Florida that just it's mind numbing to me how much data they put in here. It's fantastic. But I can't imagine that they're making any money because they spend so much time in the tool. I mean, they love it. And, you know, and they must not charge the PHA that much, but it's amazing. Okay. All right. So now I've gotten through laying all that out. And here we go, Carolyn. Here are my alternatives. So I lay out alternatives. In this case, they only did one. Okay. It's Energy Star, so they only had to do one, right? But we'd really like to see 2. But then this is the information that they added. They gave us a name, right? Unit cost, how many they're going to be. Again, I have no information here, so I can't compare, right? That's the problem. Shande.
So there are no requirements to this one is like owner paid utilities, right? Like how are they gonna get utility information from?
This is required in all cases, whether it's underpaid or not. So when I'm a needs assessor and I go out to the site, I'm agnostic as to whether it's tenant paid or underpaid utilities, because my job is to know how much that GE refrigerator uses, quote unquote, because I'm using standard numbers.
Okay.
Because I'm going to compare my standard use numbers against, because there's an energy audit that's being done as well. So the energy audit is going to dictate what the actual results have been at the property, right? Okay. But yeah, so from a needs assessment standpoint, absolutely, I want all of the information, right? Because all I'm comparing is the standard refrigerator is going to use 500 kilowatt hours, and this new Energy Star is going to use 100. Right? That's what I'm trying to put in. Okay, that's a great question, but that's a great part of what their job is all about. And it's also why the best firms, because we require an energy audit as well, the best firms do both. There's no requirement that they do both, but the best firms do both because that they really integrate the tool and the energy audit together, which matters a lot.
But a side note, for getting tenant paid utilities for like their utility allowance and stuff, there's like a form that a tenant like agrees to release their unit.
You do it for every tenant or like a sample?
There are some sampling procedures. If you want an Energy Star score, you're supposed to use all, you're not supposed to sample it all, but HUD does have sampling procedures.
Great questions. So this is, again, we've already seen this deficiency. We've also added, thanks to GRP, this greenhouse gas emissions number. Okay. All right.
Where's that come from?
The needs assessor will pull that up. They can find that information. There's a way to get the greenhouse gas emissions for each component. Okay. Then this last line item, this is what it all rolls into. This is what you want to see, because I need this total cost to operate, because the total cost to operate is made up of two things. How much the utility cost is, and how much straight line depreciation, if you will, of the component price am I dealing with. So I just take the cost of the item divided by its useful life, and that gives me an annual cost per year. And I add that to the utility cost for an overall cost. So if I'm comparing different alternatives, I can look and see, yeah, this component on a utility cost is saving me $10, but it costs me $50 more. It's so much more expensive. That doesn't make any sense to do. Or it costs me $100 more to do it, but it's saving me $1,000 in utilities. So it's a no-brainer to pay the premium. And that's what you want to see. And that's the sort of analysis we want and require. Okay. So when we're looking at these ones for GRP and we're looking for ones for RAD moving forward, we're going to have these in. Okay. So then we have at the bottom that comparison. So here you go. The original component cost this, the recommended component cost this. It gives me a variance, right? So I don't even have to know positive is bad, negative is good. I want to be saving money. In this case, I'm spending more. But then, of course, what's missing here? Usage. So I don't have a true number, right? But this would then inform me, if I did have a true number, whether it makes sense to early replace the item or just go ahead and replace it at the end of its useful life. Because quite frankly, this could be more expensive. It may very well be. You know, inflation's gone up, components cost more money, utility prices have also gone up. But guess what? The item has to be replaced anyway. At the end of its useful life, it's getting replaced. It's not like I can say, well, I'm not going to replace it. Gone, time to go, Carol.
With the original component, we'll be asking, let's just say it's an electric hot water heater at this point, and we'll be comparing the gas, greenhouse gas of that electric versus the greenhouse gas of the gas fired.
Right.
Will we be asking that?
So great question. So that's why we added this greenhouse gas emissions. That's also why you can mix media here. So I can compare electric to gas and get a true comparison. So I'll be able to look at that and see. And we're going to build out, we don't have it yet, but there's going to be a carbon reduction comparison chart, just like the bottom one here, that tells you which one is more carbon friendly. Great. Okay. Right. So very compressed, lots of stuff covered. Resource desk, recap tool, CNA, HUD-wide tool, CNA, across all platforms. All you guys are doing the same thing, same reviews, same everything. What does that mean for you all generally? Well, it means that there's tons of training on it, which is great. And we're going to do tons more. It also means you've got a great cohort outside of just this group, right? So I know that this is predominantly a grant loan specialist group in this meeting, which is fantastic. But, you know, Stanley's here, right? Talk to him. Carly's here. Amanda's here, right? You guys can still talk about CNAs. What am I seeing? What have I seen? You know, Carolyn's a great resource for you guys on this anyway, but this is something that is recap centric. It is the cornerstone of your programs, and I can never stress that enough. That's why your office spends the time and the energy on getting you trained, because it's important for everybody to be looking at these things and understanding the importance of each component. So we'll dig deeper into them as they start coming in, but that's pretty much a quick overview, a little long-winded, but quick enough for you guys.